Hello and welcome back to the Data Privacy Lawyer. My name is Funmi Owolabi. Today's review, we're going to be looking at cookies. So I personally have never been to Nobu. I've heard of it. If you've been, leave a comment below and let me know if it's any good. The first thing I can notice here is that they do have the preference center and a notice. I actually really like the positioning and offering by CookieBot, and I will tell you why. Sometimes there's like a flow, right? Sometimes you get just the notice and then you have the opportunity to then like opt in and out like this. But I think it's really fun that they've combined the notice and the consent into one section, making it easier for consumers. They don't have to click too many buttons. I really like that a lot. The other thing I really like is the fact that you can actually see the details if you wanted in this like preference center way, and you can scroll down and look at all of the cookies that apply to each category. That's really valuable as well. And I also wonder if this is an automated thing, which would be really valuable for organizations. One of the offerings that I have on my website is I actually make recommendations for consent management platforms for clients. The reason being is because it makes your life easier when it comes to managing consent. So let's say, for example, let me show you what is going to happen in practice. If I select for this particular site that I'm okay with statistic cookies, helping this website owner understand how I interact with their site. If I toggle that one on, but I don't toggle the rest, necessary is mandatory. But if I toggle this and I allow only the selection, what's going to be fed back to this organization is that this user, meaning me, Funmi, is okay with, I think of statistics. Let me make sure I check the one that I clicked. Okay, yeah. Funmi is okay with statistic cookies being collected. Now, I also love that it's so easy to withdraw your consent. One of the tenets or factors that constitute consent is that it needs to be just as easy to give your consent as it is to withdraw your consent, which is what that button is. I really, really like the CookieBot offering. I think it's really great. I also think that this is so handy for a consumer, right? It's all about user experience. As part of our work as privacy counsel, we also look at user experience because certain privacy legislation has indicated or inferred that it's very important to not make it difficult for consumers to understand your business's privacy practices. And we actually have terminology and guidance that has come out from regulatory bodies about how to make it simple for consumers to, one, understand your own company's privacy practices, but two, not engage in things like dark patterns or privacy zuckering or bad defaults, etc., etc. There's different manipulation tactics that some organizations will put in place to make it difficult for consumers to like opt out, withdraw their consent, understand different types of legal jargon. I've talked on my reviews about understanding your audience and having a particular tone when it comes to drafting the public-facing documents. I don't want to spend too much time on just looking at the preference center, but I'm going to keep this the same. The reason I clicked it was because this third party facilitates this organization to be able to manage the consent that's being given by the consumers, which I'm a consumer of the website. So I'm not going to change it, but I just wanted to display that before we go into looking at the policy. So I love this, the effective date and last updated, really very useful. Let me tell you why it's useful to have these dates. If you update the site, right, in a business, we have different groups. Different groups conduct different functions. There is a group that manages how this website is run, right? Traditionally, that is not the sales group, right? Traditionally, that's not the marketing group. Traditionally, that's the IT group, right? It may even be that it's something that you outsource to a third party. The value in having an effective date and last updated is because the different groups that facilitate a cookie notice or cookie policy, the legal group, the IT group, etc., need to work hand in hand to see when the provisions below are effective and when this document was last updated. If an organization makes a change on their website, let's say they introduce a new cookie, that information not only needs to be relayed to the legal team to make sure that these provisions are still applicable, but it also needs to be relayed to the IT team who's going to update this, and it also needs to be relayed to the consent management platform in the event any of these changes. Let's talk about the provisions. I think it's really valuable to have these in any case. This cookie policy explains what cookies are, how we use them, types of cookies we use, and how to manage your cookie settings. That's really good. I think the only tweak that I would probably make personally is identify who the we is. I don't know if this is just one entity or several entities. I know that they have different locations in different states. So who is the we, right? And maybe it's dictated below, but one of the things that I like to tell organizations is, make it apparent who the legal entity is, because if consumers ever have any questions about how cookies are being collected, they're going to want to know and identify who the party is. I also think that it's probably a question that would be asked by a entity if they ever had an investigation go on. Who constitutes we? Who's responsible? The reason why that's such an important piece of information is because when we look at the data protection laws, they generally use language like data controller and data processor. Those are valuable pieces of information because they identify who the responsible party is and the obligations on each respective party. In this capacity, the we would be the data controller because they determine how cookies are collected and processed, right? That's what they're saying, how we use them. We would be the party using them. We has responsibilities, right? We don't know who the we is right now. We see the word Nobu, but is this the legal entity that is registered in the state? And what is the name of that legal entity? Some people will go by their as known as name, which is some companies will have one product that a lot of companies know about, a lot of consumers know about. It's not the name of their legal entity, it's the name of their product, and that's what they traditionally go by. The name of the product is not the data controller. The data controller is the legal entity that's registered in the applicable jurisdiction. So that's a really important piece of information. Let's get into cookies here. So we've got the necessary cookies and we've got the duration. One of the really underlying principles when it comes to privacy is ensuring that no data is retained indefinitely. So this is very necessary for organizations to display. This is very necessary for consumers to know because it is an underlying principle that essentially or effectively exists in every piece of privacy legislation in some capacity, right? It's going to differ depending on the geography. So we also know that we've got these marketing. One thing I like to do, I like to open up the cookie settings and the preference center, and I like to verify that what they've dictated in the policy or notice is also what's happening in the preference center. So we've got the word marketing, right? We've got the word marketing. This is one of the ones that I have declined to allow. And so we can scroll down, statistics, analytics, we've got statistics, and then we also have preference, right? So I talked a bit about the liaison that happens between the IT team, the third party that manages consent, and then also the legal team. And it may be there's other different stakeholders that are influenced by this cookie notice. And I'll give you an example, actually. Let's go to another one of their pages. Let's go to the contact page. So let's talk about this, right? We talked about lots of different stakeholders. So they've got a couple things that I want to talk about. I didn't know that Nobu was actually in other geographies. I'm only familiar with the US one. Let's see if they've got one in the district. Oh my goodness, they do. Okay, so I wanted to go to this, reserve and contact. So the reason why I wanted to talk about cookies is this page could be managed by the marketing team. If the marketing team is going to place beacons or pixels or certain types of cookies specific to this page, then they would be a stakeholder that would be influenced by the cookie policy, because whatever they're placing on this page to track an individual would also need to be reconciled on the cookie policy that we were just on. Likewise, I just saw that they do careers here, right? This career page is probably managed by the HR team. If the HR team has placed different types of tracking technologies on this page, then how this page interacts with the entire website would need to be articulated on the cookie policy. So there's lots of people whose fingers are in this pie. Yeah, there's a lot of liaison that happens between the groups. The facilitator for these discussions is usually the Privacy Council, because the Privacy Council needs to articulate it and draft the language. So we need to be aware of what's happening with all the stakeholders who have a stake in the different pages on the site, because all of that is articulated here for consumers to see. So I really hope you enjoyed this review. I like looking at cookies and public-facing privacy documents. That's something that I do as part of my practice. If you enjoyed this review, leave a comment below and I will see you in another review.